The scream beneath the pillow, loose hair, sagging breasts. Death lay beside me, her breast like a wet clay against the face. The cold sheets are yellowed, dim lights, neon blues, and death sitting at the edge of my bed, loose hair.
Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, download our free app, and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And as I continue to traverse the landscape of music and the musicians who make it, the lineage of music goes far back into different regional pockets of this country, back to the diaspora of the slave trades, going back to the Middle Americas, all the way back to the motherland of Africa. And I got a chance today to talk to one of my peers, a cat who's putting messages down on his keyboard and through the microphone, trying to enlighten people through a collective consciousness on the bandstand. Khalif Neville, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it's such an honor, man. You know, Khalif, I realize that, you know, you come from a serious legacy as it relates to your family, but I wanted you to, I've noticed on some of your clips, you're playing a lot, you're paying homage to the Mardi Gras Indians and a lot of the tunes from New Orleans. But I just wanted you to talk about how you were raised insofar as your understanding of the Mardi Gras Indians, and also the solidarity of, you know, how they basically came to origin, and then ultimately how you were, with the understanding of the spiritualism of their music.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, when I was growing up, even in an unacademical sense, we always used to play the Wild Chapatulas album, so that was a big part of my childhood in that, right?
Yeah.
But my dad always told me that his version of where the Mardi Gras Indians originated was that some escaped slaves ran off into the bayou and hooked up with the Native Americans and kind of took some of their culture and practices and then did their own thing with them. And that in New Orleans, the Mardi Gras Indian practice and whatnot, he would call it a gang, but I don't think, even though they talk about taking people down with their hatchets, I don't really ever think it was like anyone was out to kill each other, and it was more of a competitive thing, and they were like little tribes, so to speak. So that was the way I was taught about it from the beginning.
Your father, did he collaborate with the Mardi? I mean, I guess it was essentially, from my understanding, at least the generic story was that slaves would run away from the plantation and they had safe haven at the Native American places of residence, and ultimately, when they breeded, when they had children, you know, you had this mix of Native American and African blood, and I just wonder about. I mean, have you gone back to New Orleans recently? Have you? What's the closest thing you've gotten aside from the Wild Chupatulas and playing the tunes? What's the closest you've come to experiencing Mardi Gras Indian music?
Well, other than playing it a lot up around here in Massachusetts where I live, I do go one time a year, but I'd say it's definitely my great uncle who founded the Wild Chapatulas, Chief Jolly. He I think that's the lineage gets to it, and my dad, even there's pictures of him wearing the costumes and everything, and I'm sure all the brothers did at one point or the other, but it's more of like a mythical thing to me. Like, I've never met my uncle or great uncle, so I kind of look up to him in that way, that he was the big chief and the original uptown ruler, as they call.
Can you? It might be folkloric, but can you tell a story that you've heard about your great uncle, Chief Jolly? I've documented. I've talked to Bo Dallas Jr. about his dad. I've talked to Juan Pardo, who's now the leader of an Indian tribe down there. I mean, could you talk about some of what might be mythical, but actually probably really did go down with Big Chief Jolly?
Well, let's see. Because these are all like second generation stories. My dad telling me what he told him, but I think the coolest one is that I would really credit Big Chief Jolly with founding the Neville brothers, and that, from what my dad says, he told them all to come down to New Orleans, because I think my dad and Cyril or Aaron, one of the two, were living in New York at the time, and I think it was right after my dad's father passed away. Actually, no, I'm 100% on that, but I think that was the reason he wanted them all to come get together. And then he sat them down, and he's like, "Look, fellas, you're all doing music in your own way, but I think it'd be 100 times more powerful if you came together and did something like that." So that was the inception of the Wild Chapatulas album. And I think that's one of the coolest parts for me, is that he kind of laid the groundwork for everything.
That's fantastic. Talking to Khalif Neville here. I just curious about how old are you, my man?
I'm only 20, man.
Dude, you are.
21,
I mean, dude, I'm 30. I'm 39, but I mean, you're just out of your. I mean, you're just out of the womb, basically. But I mean, what is it? Can you honestly say that? Because I've noticed you're playing, and I see you fusing modern vocabulary with jazz and soul, and but do you think that vocabulary and music can grow in academia? I mean, did you get a degree in music from academia? Or
No, I would say actually I took a bit of an unconventional route, in that I've learned, not through very academic means, but just from my family for my whole life. And I would say I found, from getting that like raw experience straight from the source, that academia gets a little like washed down. I don't know how to put it, but I've just found, this is the best way I can put it, a lot of cats I play with who come straight out of school, it seems like they're a little scared, and they have trouble kind of expressing themselves to their fullest potential. And I wouldn't say if it directly results from the way things are taught, but I would say creativity, for me at least, didn't really spring from academia at all.
So what was through high school, did you go to college and study?
No, actually, I didn't. I got accepted into Berkeley School of Music, and then I deferred for 1 year just to play, and here I am, still playing.
Unbelievable. So I this is fantastic. Can you talk about a time, this is so important, Khalif, like where, this idea of, I guess you said, what was the word? Was it creativity that you used? The idea. Yeah. Can you talk about being on the bandstand and a specific time of basically being able to find your own voice, even if it was being humbled? But the point is that there's not a lot of bandstand opportunities for younger cats. So, and the fact that you're taking this unconventional route, I'd love you to talk about a emblematic moment on the bandstand for Khalif Neville.
Let's see. Well, I had a pretty good one. Was it last weekend, where me and my band were supposed to open up for this festival that goes on in a town near where I live, and the schedule got shifted around, so we ended up having to headline, and I kind of had to pull it out of the hat and lay down a good festival headlining set, and the reviews were pretty good, so I think I did okay. But that was one point where I was like, it's my show, and I got to kind of take the reins and make it happen. And even before that, though, I'd say it was probably just when members of my family or just peers of mine would listen to my original stuff and be like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And that was when I started to get the gist that my creative side was all right.
When you take the reins on the bandstand, what does that mean? I mean, does it mean you gotta, everybody's got to listen and raise the collective consciousness? Does it mean you have to basically just be the leader? And I mean, how does that look? What I'm getting at is like the idea of, ultimately being able to channel your own individual voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was more a matter of, I did a lot of my original material, and that's kind of how I would pin like channeling your voices through doing your own stuff. And I think my journey was just through writing a lot and finally getting to a place where I really think the stuff that I'm writing can hold its weight. And that's I'd say that's the part of the creative process that a lot of younger musicians struggle with, is just writing at all, because a lot of jazz musicians particularly think it's all about playing, and that they really put composition pretty low down on the totem pole as far as importance goes in like making a career, when I really think that that's what defines your individuality, and individuality is what kind of will give you an edge in the business. So I'd say it's a pretty important thing.
How hard is it in your mind? I mean, not that you're striving to be a millionaire, but being that you're creating original tunes, how hard is it now in this day and age to cut through all the material that we are exposed to? I mean, when your dad was coming up, it was freeform radio, records, tapes. It was regional music. So, you know, bands that were coming out of the Northeast would get play in the Northeast, vice versa in New Orleans and Miami and Atlanta. Now we're in this deluge of YouTube, and there's so much material out there, and there's really no record industry. And quite honestly, there's not really a big touring circuit unless you're some band that has a 40-year reputation and you can just play those hits. So I'm curious, how do you know that you're cutting through the morass? And I know this is like kind of like, it's maybe hard for you to answer, but like I've done it on new media myself on Facebook. I mean, I've figured out a niche. So how have you when did the Khalif Neville niche begin, and where is it at now?
So I'd say it was really when you mentioned some lyrical stuff that I've done, which I haven't done too much of recently, but like when I really started getting into music, I made a lot of hip hop, and that was a little bit of a different direction than most of the Nevilles took. So that gave me a slightly different skill set for most of my family at that point. But then as I went on, I don't really do as much of the lyrical side of that anymore, but making that music, that really helped me kind of understand even a lot of the modern stuff that you do hear on the radio and YouTube, and kind of take some of the elements from that, but then fuse it with the really raw and like soulful, not over-compressed parts of jazz and funk and blues and all that. And
You're right on it, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what the one thing that I'd say, like because I'm going, to be honest, the only way I think you can make it in this business is to be as pessimistic as possible and just be honest with yourself about the odds of things. And I do that. And the one thing I always think when I'm getting down because I have a bad gig or something is just like, what about my sound cuts me away from the crowd? And I'd say it is that mixture of the understanding that I got from my family of all the older forms of music, but also my own study of a lot of modern styles, and the way that I mix those together, I think is pretty unique. And I think that's the one thing that I can put on the table that a lot of other cats aren't in the same way.
Could you talk to peeps out there that are listening worldwide about the elements of hip-hop that you did fuse into the different styles of music that the Nevilles taught you? Because I think that I think it's important to fuse modern-day music, but I think it's important to fuse the right things.
So I'd say a lot of what I got from hip-hop, because hip-hop obviously, basically every form of music after jazz kind of went out of the mainstream in the 60s and 70s, took a lot from that, particularly African American music. So a lot of the early hip-hop, be it like Jay Dilla or High Tech, who are two producers from the 90s, they obviously took a lot of influence from jazz in the theoretical things they were doing, but also in that they just chopped up a lot of jazz samples and used that. And so I'd say the one big thing from a musical level is that in hip-hop, because it's a very repetitive form, the chord changes are really short and put together, and I think that's something that people would consider a modern sound, is that really tight recycling loop, as they call it. And that's something I'll put into a song, but then still have a jazzy form where there's solos and whatnot, but it's all over this tight kind of hip-hop structure.
What are the? This is fascinating to me. You use this term compressed parts of jazz. That is fascinating to me. I mean, I argue that instrumental improvisational music is not able to breathe, mainly because, or at least studio recordings, when I hear them, you can't tell individual sound. You can't tell who's playing, and then also. When you start to emulate, when the drum machine came in, this is going back before either me or you were ever birthed, but people started to imitate a machine, and it becomes pretty formulaic. What is compressed? When you listen to jazz, I don't hear a lot of bottom. I don't hear a lot of deep bottom end, and I don't hear a lot of using the bass drum for rebound or feathering. I just hear a lot of pulsating. Almost machine gun. Can you talk about the compression? Because I think this is you're on the bandstand, but I hear it.
Yeah. So I'd say one thing that I think just everyone from New Orleans has is pretty good rhythmic sense because of all the marching bands and what have it. That really they've just all got really good beats, And I found that bass players and drummers from New Orleans and even piano players are usually just in a rhythmic sense far ahead of everyone else, people from New York and really anywhere, just because that's kind of in your body and your being. Like there's this beat that my dad calls the bambula, but I actually learned from someone that was pretty well read, called the tresillo, which it's just a 3-beat rhythm, and it goes don't, and that's like the pretty classic second line kind of rhythm. And whenever I'm counting a song, I'll usually hear that before I hear straight 4/4. So I'd say being from New Orleans definitely helps with getting the rhythms tight, and because that's from even making a lot of hip hop, I've just found that the root of any good beat is just that, is a good beat. So the drums have to kind of lock up. And as far as compressed jazz, I'd say when it's really just, it doesn't have that pulse, or it's kind of, there's no real rhythmical dynamics, that's when it feels a little dead to me.
You're spot on, dude. Your ears are huge, man. I mean, that is exactly it. There's no dynamics. And I think part of it was, had your dad talked to you about the times that he played in unamplified settings where he was like, really, is that how you think how do you think your dad learned, or his generation learned about dynamics? I mean, I talked to engineers today, and those, even in vocals of pop singers, there's no dynamics in pop singing, And how did your dad learn dynamics, and how are you learning to incorporate dynamics?
So, I'd say probably part of how he learned is because, I mean, he's obviously an OG. He's been playing since when amplifiers just came out.
Yeah, so before, probably.
I imagine, like, he played in B.B. King's band, and just a lot of, like, before he started playing jazz or funk or any of that, he was playing a lot of, like, blues and just what was hot back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I can imagine back then the sound setups for stages weren't as comprehensive as they were today, and they horn players probably didn't have like individual mics, so I bet you really had to belt it out. And that's, I imagine, if you learn how to play really loud, then you can reverse it and kind of tone it down. So I'd imagine that probably helped him develop his dynamic range, was just having to kind of stand out from the crowd with amplitude.
I want to put this piece of music in for you, see if you can peg where it's from, and then we'll come back and break it down.
All right.
All right, my man, what do you got for us there?
You know, I couldn't really tell what the song was from the beginning, but I'll say first thing I noticed is it's that classic Leo Nocentelli guitar effect. But
Yeah, that was Khalif, Big Chief Neville.
yeah, that's what I thought at the end. I was like, that sounds like Yellow Moon. Huh?
That's Yellow Moon, but with the band called the Stacking Stones.
Yeah, and the funny thing, I'm playing at that same spot, the Cantab Lounge, on September 1st. Well,
hold on, this was called Club Bohemia. Is that?
Oh,
yeah, because I was going to say
it's the same building.
Oh, dude, because I mean, I can't believe, because the Cantab. I went to Boston University, and the Cantab Lounge. I mean, that was like more like a bluegrass, but I guess there's some funk. That's pretty cool. So you're bringing...
Yeah, that's the Bohemia is the downstairs part, so it's all in the same building.
Dude, I mean, I was loving this. The yellow. Can you talk about, even though you're not necessarily, verbalize, a lot of songwriting now maybe, but can you talk about how you build a song like Yellow Moon?
Well, I obviously didn't write it on the bass line. That was my uncle, Mr. Aaron Neville, but I'd say, like, I know most people aren't going to get this, but I'll like, give away a couple of the Neville secrets. Like, most of I know my dad's songs, and even, like, Aaron's tunes, they have this movement between the 1 chord and the 4th chord and the 5 chord, which it translates across a lot of them. Like, Yellow Moon is just, it sits on that G for a while, and then it goes up to the... It's a very similar progression, but that definitely influenced me a lot, because a lot of my songs have the same kind of sound. But I'm not sure. I think for that song, since that bass line is so heavy, I'd imagine that's probably what he came up with first, because Aaron actually plays keyboards too. So I bet that's how he did it.
I guess in your own, if you were like when you're writing original comps, you're the. Are you Big Chief? Is that your name?
No, I'm just doing Khalif Neville now. I kind of retired from the rap game.
You retired 20 years old. You're retiring the nickname. I love it.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how when you're writing original songs, how it's so funny, because you go back in history, and I'm sure that your father and his brothers are the same way. Something's is like a corny joke, and then all of a sudden, like, the corniest joke becomes the most serious thing when you're on the bandstand, because millions of people are getting off on it. Yet it doesn't, and I'm just curious, like, have you been in the situation, like, do you try to write songs through real life experience? Is it just poetry? I mean, can you talk about how you build your own individual lyrics and songs?
So, I'd say a lot of the best lyrics I've written were probably, I don't know, they're all pretty abstract. Like, the more and more I wrote, the kind of trippier my songs got. But I'd say it'd be a thematic thing. Like, I don't know, I try to keep most of my stuff semi-political, so I'd always throw in little bits about current events and just weave that. Really, as far as like hip hop goes, it's all based around the hook or the chorus. So usually write that first, and then kind of work your way in and out of it. So that's really what it depends on. But obviously, Yellow Moon is like a sort of love song. So I think the original lyrics I wrote for that kind of reflected that feeling, because that's one thing my dad always told me, even just from an instrumental standpoint, is like, if you're playing a song that had lyrics and you're doing an instrumental version, you still got to carry over the feeling that those lyrics portrayed. So
can you say that one more time? That was important.
Just that my dad taught me that even if you're just playing instrumentally, if it's over a song that had lyrics, you want your instrument to kind of carry over the same feeling that those lyrics had.
Oh, I dig. Do you know Rick Marotta?
I might. It sounds kind of familiar.
He's a badass. He was a studio drummer for. He's still kicking butt, but he was. I want to read you this quote. I wish I had it queued up on my archive, but I'm going to read it to you right now. He said, "I knew how to play a shuffle because I listened to music and played what guys played in the shuffle. When I was playing in the Riverboat Soul Band, we had a couple of songs. We were at a couple of songs that were shuffles. It was a 10-piece band, so when I played the shuffle, it felt fine. Charles Neville pulled me aside and said, you your shuffle sounds great, but it would feel really, really good if you played it a little differently. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'll show you. Charles played alto in the band we were in. He sat down on the drums and played his hands and his feet all at the same time playing the shuffle. Ta-ta, 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 ta-ta. It was so stripped down, so basic. And then he said, now take that shuffle, and whatever you do, you're always thinking of those notes when you play. You can play just quarter notes on the bass drum, you could play just backbeat on the snare drum, but the shuffle is always inside. That was in its simplest form. That was a shuffle. I know the other guys who heard me play a shuffle like that would look at me and say, what is he doing? Pretty soon they'd be playing the same thing because it felt great, and they couldn't figure out how it felt so great. Rick Marotta, you know, this guy has played on Steely Dan Peg. I mean, he played, everything, hundreds, and he was going back. He was dear friends with your dad in that Riverboat Soul band. But I want to know how you learned your own individual time feel, and how you learned. I mean, how many times did you play shuffles? Like, shuffles seem to me to be a bit of a lost art. So how did you develop your own inner time feel, and then how did you learn to play a shuffle?
So I'd say as far as shuffles go, I think I learned like how to play swing jazz before that, and it's kind of
You're right.
like I don't want to say ancient, but I guess that'd work. It's like an ancient swing where it's like you said, it's really stripped down, but then it somehow carries a lot more energy because obviously like all the boogie woogie stuff kind of comes from a feel like that, and it's just whenever that was something that made me pause when I first started learning it, was how a beat that was so simple could warrant such like energy on the other instruments. But
I did.
Shuffles are fun, man. It's a good time. My little brother Talon actually plays the drums, and he has fun jamming on the shuffles.
Do you like? I'm curious. Do you have a trap set in your band? Like, what's the instrumentation in your band?
So my band currently is a trio. So we got a drummer and a bass player, and then my dad, whenever he's around, he likes to sit in with us, which is fun.
Are you doing it in a? Is it the traditional roles of the rhythm section, or are you kind of trying to open it up a little bit more?
Oh, it's all. Probably the best compliment I've gotten is from the drummer I work with a lot now. He's like, man, until I started playing with you, I really never soloed. And I was like, what? So I just open it up and let anyone do whatever they want, but still live within the form of a song. But definitely everyone has their solo time, and it's really open. And that's the thing. When I'd say one skill that I really gained from making hip hop is when you lay all the tracks down, like you do the drum beat, you add the bass and everything, you kind of see how things snap together, and then you can take that skill set and apply it to a real band. So when you've only got 3 pieces, you kind of have to make them compensate for the fact that it's such a small setup with a lot of other interesting stuff. So I definitely have everyone play an equal amount of stuff.
I did. So but like in a live setting at this festival, for instance, can you talk about how you create sonic expansion with just a trio? I mean, are you doing? Yeah, just riff on that, because I think that it's. I mean, this is not like a Cream power trio. You know, it's not like Jack Bruce kind of stuff, which is a little bit abstract. But what is it? I mean, how are you expand? Go ahead.
Oh, it was funny. My dad actually he likes to play Sunshine of Your Love. And so we do that sometimes as a shuffle, actually.
I dig.
But let's see. So I think the main thing, and this also comes heavily from the hip hop I made, is just it's all on the beat, and like you can really, if you just have a solid beat and a solid like bass line or chord progression, as long as it recycles, it really won't get boring. And then it's kind of being able to just like once you lay that down. For example, on this festival gig, we opened up with Sissy Strut, which just has that really simple and repetitive kind of lick, and then it's just kind of taking that and then being able to, like we're talking about, edit the dynamics. So being that most of the guys in my band are jazz musicians, would just take it all over the place and go into some Coltrane Freedom, or just it's really laying down the groove for the tune and then taking it from there. And that's what I think what makes it work with just three pieces is that the direction of the whole song that everyone's playing kind of goes to different places.
One reason I feel like one reason I do my show is to stay away from the toxicity of politics, but yet we live in such interesting and historic times in my mind that I look back and I've interviewed all the cats, the guys that used to play. Hugh Masekela used to play Black Panther rallies. There was a musical component attached to social justice causes, and I wonder if it's something that like you talked about having some messages in your songs, but do you feel there's a way, or do you feel like there's a need? I feel like one thing that's lacking with some of the social movement, some of the strength and emotive and spiritual qualities of it, is that there's no musical component to some of these some of these marches. And I'm wondering if you feel like that's a step for you, whether you've already done that, whether you've played at some of these, whatever you want to call them, protests, rallies, advocacy things. I mean, I'm talking about Black Lives Matter, whatever it is.
Yeah.
To me, there was the Vietnam War. When you look back at that time, there was a huge musical component to it. And I'm just curious if Khalif Neville has done that, or whether you think that it's something that's kind of necessary for musicians now to communicate musically for that.
Well, I can't really say I've ever done it like a Black Lives Matter rally or anything, but I'll certainly say I think what artists can do is just make their political position known, because obviously you have a fan base and
Right.
more people are listening to that statement than your average person. So I'd say just make it clear. Like one of the drummers I work with a lot, he always wears a Black Lives Matter shirt when he's playing, and just even that is a statement enough
Absolutely.
to the audience know, like, oh, okay, this is what this guy thinks. And more than that, I think what I like to do is, it's especially because I'm just doing a lot of instrumental music now, I just take from styles that carry a certain tone, because I know most people wouldn't think that music itself can be political, but like if you play a really hard, like hitting, it's the genre is called trap, which is like the modern day kind of heavy hip hop. If you play one of those beats, like anyone will know what the connotation and the energy is. It's like from the streets, and it's got that kind of gritty, gnarly feeling. And I think I take that and roll it over into my music that I do with my band some, so it has that kind of voice of, the black community and the just the urban environment that a lot of people are struggling in its own way, that I don't necessarily have to say any words, but just the feeling of the song will convey that. So I think that's more of what I'm doing, is just trying to play music that, comes from the people of color, and kind of, if anything, just if there's young kids that ever come to a show and they see what we're doing, I think particularly a lot of African American youth don't play jazz anymore. They try to, I don't even know if they do music at all really, but like obviously jazz came from the African American community back in the olden days.
Absolutely.
And I just think part of that is because it doesn't seem very exciting, right? It's just a bunch of old stuff that a lot of old white dudes in suits are playing, at least on the surface, is what it looks like. And
yeah, that's not the way. That's not the way. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I just, like, if I could do one thing, I just want to change that perception, because, like, hip-hop is wonderful, but it's gotten poisoned in its own way and sold out, where a lot of the rappers today aren't really saying anything helpful or constructive. And obviously, like, Chuck D and all those guys with their Fight the Power, it wasn't, like, it was political, but not it had a message, A lot of stuff today is just, like, destructive and misogynistic and violent, and it's like, that's not really going to affect any change if it's just perpetuating the same feeling. You know what I'm saying?
No, who are you? You're 20 years old, and you're unbelievable. Before I let you go, because we've been cooking here for 35 minutes and having a ball, but I could go for longer. But I just want to get Khalif. This is like at 39. I'm a father of two. I've been on this crusade for 6 years, and one of the L's on my show is love. And so I kind of wanted to get your concept of love and how, aside from on the bandstand, what do you think, how do you bring love to our world?
Just, to be positive and, like, that's one thing that music has really given me, and I think gave my dad and all of our family, is like in these ridiculous times, like even just a song. Like I remember, now that I play music, it's kind of hard to just space out and get into that same headspace.
Right.
But just sometimes if stuff is just not going too hot for you, you just turn on a good song and zone out. That'll give you enough peace of mind and freedom to just feel a little bit better. And I think that's kind of what I hope, is that my music lets people escape a little bit from everything and shares the good energy, so to speak. And even on a non-musical level, I just say just practicing being a kind and compassionate human being is probably the best thing you can do. Like my dad taught me that. He does Tai Chi, so he's pretty centered.
No, he's like, I mean,
but,
do you have a way of evaluating the fan base that you're cultivating? Is it basically a New England fan base? I mean, are you, go ahead. I mean, how do you know? I mean, because a lot of times, you develop that fan base locally, and then it grows out from there. And I'm just curious about the evolution of your music and your fan base.
Yeah, so I'd say, being that I live in Massachusetts, that's obviously where I try to do most of my shows, because I don't really want to drive to Florida every week to play a gig. But so yeah, I'd say a lot of, like, when I really started developing my fan base, it'd be a few people would show up to each show, and then it just kind of built from there. I'd say right now I play all around the New England area, like Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. Played in Albany last weekend, and Connecticut's got a lot of good spots. And then hopefully going to go conquer the Big Apple pretty soon. But
I'll tell you, I just want to tell you, I just think that, I mean, I'm from Long Island. I spend most of my life on the East Coast. I'm in Tucson now, and I'll never leave. I love it here. But, I mean, you are in a very good pocket for the kind of expression that you're trying to get across. What you just riffed on before about love. I mean, this to me, there's an appetite for it, and there's an open-mindedness for it. And I'd love to link up at some point and see you live, man. It'd be great to hang, man. It was just, I had a ball. I mean, I'm not, sometimes I'm back in Boston in the summers, but, let's just stay in touch, man. I had a ball, man. It was great to hang with you.
Hey, me as well. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, Khalif, keep swinging, baby.
Oh, thank you, man.
Later on, dude.
All right.
Peace.
Peace out.
Peace. Part of the lineage of the Neville family, Khalif Neville, doing it, and in a prolific way. That cat just hung on the Jake Feinberg Show for 40 minutes. We'll be back tonight with the York Young Trio live in studio. Until then, we'll see you in a little bit.
Mandrills. Hippopotamus. Coming on like black rhinoceros. Sponges fronting like starfish. Oh yeah, man, ain't that your mama? Fronting like youth. And leeches are there.